State standards. Yep, I'm going to be covering all that. Got my lesson plans together for the next month. My activities are ready to go. Wow, I can't believe it. I've got everything ready 3 days before school starts. My desks!
We've got a call for help. A teacher is requesting assistance setting up their classroom. Kyle, we're sending you in.
Whoa, you got here fast.
The traffic was light. Let's get to work. Welcome to Launch Your Classroom. I'm Kyle Pope. It is so great to be back for a brand new season. The cast and crew here are especially happy to join you in your journey through the upcoming school year. Speaking of that, I bet you've been working hard on planning out your first few days, weeks, and even months. How are your lesson plans coming along? I know I certainly put a lot of hours into working on those in the past. Sometimes when planning as a teacher, we become completely focused on the content and how to teach it, while the classroom itself is almost an afterthought. But if content is the what and your lesson plans are the how, your classroom is the where. The space where you teach sets the tone for your lessons, your behavioral management, and your organizational expectations. It is absolutely necessary to optimize your design for learning. So today on Launch Your Classroom, we're going to take a look at how to set up your classroom for success before your students arrive. Let's get right to one of the most important considerations: desk arrangements. When students enter your classroom, the first thing they'll really pay attention to is your desk arrangements. After all, they'll be looking for their seat. Your setup will play a huge role in how your students learn and behave. Numerous studies from the 1970s up until the present have been conducted on the effectiveness of various desk arrangements. We're going to use that data along with our personal experience to break down 3 of the most popular and effective setups: rows, semicircle, and clusters. Number 1, rows. As long as there have been schoolhouses, there have been rows. Many classrooms I've been inside still use this way to organize their students. And there's a good reason that rows have stuck around for so long. They work. When students are seated this way, they have an increased quantity of work. There are fewer instances of speaking without permission, and students are more likely to stay on task with individual assignments. But this setup is not without its faults. Students in rows are less likely to be on task when doing a group activity because it's difficult for them to work together. Also, the teacher will not be able to observe all students properly, as some can be partially hidden in the back. So if you do use rows, you'll want to make sure that you stay mobile as you teach. Number 2, semicircle. In this setup, the desks are moved to create a semicircle around the front of the room. There may need to be an added row or other adaptations depending on student number. The semicircle pattern has proven to greatly increase student interaction with the teacher and the lesson. Student engagement is particularly high during class discussions. So if you like to use a lot of discourse to enhance your curriculum, this could be the best arrangement for you. However, you should be advised that students who sit in a semicircle have a decreased likelihood to stay on task with individual assignments. If this is your seating choice, you'll want to watch your spacing between desks to minimize students distracting one another. Number 3, clusters. There are various setups associated with clusters, but the basic idea is that you put student seats together to form natural groups. The biggest bonus to using clusters is that students have increased on-task behavior for group activities. This setup facilitates the perfect working conditions for collaboration. So if you mainly use group activities and projects, clusters may be the best choice. Keep in mind that students seated facing each other are going to have decreased interaction with the teacher and are going to be prone to distract each other from individual assignments. Because of those issues, you'll want to make sure that you are very confident and effective in your classroom management before using clusters. Keep in mind, just because you start with a setup doesn't mean that you have to keep it every day. Make it suit your assignments. So if you prefer clusters for group work, but decide to do an in-depth individual assignment, switch to rows for a day. Or if you like the proven effectiveness of rows, but like to have an occasional discussion, it's fine to switch back and forth with semicircles. Make the desk arrangements work for you. And no matter which of the 3 setups you choose, rest assured that each one, under the right conditions, has been proven effective for creating high-quality work.
Now that your desks are arranged, you need to determine where each student will sit. There are numerous reasons why, but let's begin with the most important. One of the biggest causes of an unproductive, noisy classroom is the lack of a seating chart. When students are allowed to choose their seat, they will decide to sit next to their friends. The temptation to speak out of turn is far too great. And ultimately, they will end up distracting one another and missing valuable parts of your lesson. When creating a seating chart at the first of the year, it's best to map out your desks on a piece of paper. Then write in student names from the class roster. Many school technology platforms will allow you to digitally reconstruct your classroom and then add student photos to each desk. Both methods are highly valuable for learning students' names and faces at the beginning of the year. Another great benefit to seating charts is that it allows you to create peer tutoring opportunities. Placing a high academic achieving student next to a student who may struggle a bit with the material can have a positive impact on both students. So if you want to maximize your classroom management, learn your students' names quickly, and facilitate positive groupings, use a seating chart.
It looks like you're all set up for student collaboration.
Thanks, Kyle. These are perfect for student activities.
Well, it looks like my work here is done.
My walls!
You're right. We can't let all this valuable classroom real estate go to waste. We need poster paper and some markers.
The best classroom is the one that is inviting and encourages learning. Your walls are a great tool to help you achieve this goal. You'll want to have the essentials, like your classroom rules and school schedule, posted clearly in the front of the room, while information that needs updating, such as your daily agenda and learning objectives, should be on your whiteboard. Save space on your wall for completed student work. A teacher who displays such items conveys a sense of pride and inclusion to their students. It's really a great feeling to have students excited to point out their work and share it with each other, and it encourages them to produce high-quality work. After all, this isn't going to be hidden in a drawer. This will be on display for everyone to see. Your walls also provide another opportunity to enhance and reinforce learning. When students get a little distracted, one of the first places they're going to look is around the classroom. And once they see well-designed anchor charts relating to their lessons, they will continue to engage with the material. It's also a good idea to regularly direct your entire class to your anchor charts as a quick form of review. Then they'll know where to look when they're feeling lost. Now we're going to demonstrate one effective way to use wall space that will work for any teacher.
Regardless of what you teach, your curriculum will be filled with vocabulary that your students are not always familiar with. For this reason, many schools in the U.S. have advocated the use of a word wall. Simply put, a section of your room devoted to new vocabulary. Traditionally, these displays have been simplistic, like this one here. If you're a student trying to learn new vocabulary, how much help would this word wall be? Sure, they can see how it's spelled, but there isn't anything that helps them understand the meaning of the word. And that's the most important part. Not only for them to see it, but to know what it means. So we're going to help our word wall out by using a strategy called word art. The premise is easy. You'll assign specific students vocab words, give them the definition, and then allow them to use their creativity to make the word into an artistic expression which visually demonstrates the word's meaning. All they'll need is something to draw with and a piece of paper. Let's say you're in early elementary school teaching the seasons. A student might make winter partially covered in snow, or the letters in the word fall floating down the paper on leaves. Or if you're in high school teaching about different forms of government, perhaps one of your students comes up with a clever way to draw the word monarchy. There's the king or queen on top with the crown and the societal hierarchy associated with a monarchy. Very interesting. If your students are struggling with developing an idea, feel free to help them out. This is also a great partner activity, as sometimes two heads are more innovative than one. Either way, when you use word art, you're increasing your students' engagement by allowing them to be creative while teaching them important vocabulary words. And once this becomes part of your word wall, your students will have a valuable visual resource to help them cement the vocabulary into their memory. I know you're busy planning to make this the best year of teaching yet, but don't forget your room. It's the first thing your students will see when they enter. It'll dictate how they move and form groups. It can stop discipline problems before they begin, and most importantly, a well-designed room will increase your students' ability to learn the curriculum. We've got some great Launch Your Classroom content coming up this year. New material will be released every week with full episodes like this one airing at the beginning of each month. For the rest of this month, we're going to continue our discussion about classroom setup, including an expert interview on how your room should evolve during the year. We're also going to take a look at managing materials. Do you have everything you need? Do you have an organized way to store and distribute materials? Don't worry. We're here to help you find these answers. So be sure to like and subscribe to our channel to get all of our upcoming professional development content. Thank you, and I hope you'll join us for the Q&A. Now your classroom is truly a space that encourages learning. I think you're ready for the school year.
Thanks, Kyle. I just want to be the best teacher I can be for my students, and I know I'm going to need some future tips and strategies.
I left something on your desk that'll help you with your professional development.
Launch Your Classroom, the book series, and Launch Your Classroom Live. Thanks, Kyle. Kyle? Ah, light traffic. I get it.
All right. Thanks for watching and for the great questions we've been getting in the chat and through our professional development channels. We're going to answer as many of these as we can today. Remember, it's not too late to submit a question for the Q&A. If you have any questions about how to set up your classroom for success, put them in the chat and we'll answer them live. Joining us today for the Q&A is, as always, the host of Launch Your Classroom Live, Kyle Pope. Kyle, welcome back.
Thank you, Johnny. It's so great to be back.
And also joining us today is our new Launch Your Classroom Live co-host, former educator Rachel Durant. Rachel, we're so excited to have you on board.
Thank you so much, Johnny. I'm really happy to be here.
All right, let's take a look at our first question. This is coming in from Isla. Isla writes, I want to use different seating arrangements depending on my activities. Can I get my students to move the desks during class? Kyle, what do you think?
Hey Isla, yeah, thank you so much for this question. What I would advise you is to really think about several factors. One is how much time will it take for your students to move? The second one is how distracting it could be. If you do want to have your students move your desk, you need to teach it like you would any other procedure so they know what your expectations are with stuff like volume level. Also, where to put the desks. You can designate this with maybe putting tape on your floor or something like that so they know the exact positions where you want them moved in. But if you do not have time to take them through all that, to train, if it's going to take up way too much class time and you haven't set those procedures forth yet, then you probably want to move them before you ever begin the activities or begin that school day and then move them back afterwards. But thank you so much for that question.
All right, thanks, Kyle. I've got another question here. This is from Udam. When decorating your walls, how much space should you devote to anchor charts compared to student work and visuals for procedures? Rachel, what do you think?
Hey there, Udom. That's just such a good question. Anchor charts are just a marvelous resource for you to have. They are eye-catching. You often develop them with your students. They're very memorable. they're really good to have. The big thing to bear in mind is that you want to limit your most relevant content to the most visible spaces. You don't want to confuse students with old material so that they're looking less at the new material. Put your most timely information in your most visible spaces to reinforce important learning. That being said, they're a great thing to have. Don't get rid of your old ones. Perhaps you want to have a parking lot somewhere in your classroom to put those old ones so that you can bring them up for review whenever you need them. But you can have the most relevant ones posted with your procedures and with your content materials. Thank you so much. What a good question.
All right, thanks, Rachel. We've got a question in the chat from Edward. As I have students having multiple learning styles in just one classroom, how can I decide the arrangement or the type or the style of the seating chart for my students at the beginning of the school year? Kyle?
Hey, Edward, thank you so much for your question. So that's great. I love that you're thinking ahead. My suggestion for you would be to go ahead and set up your seating chart like you normally would, and then really get to know your students and get to know their learning styles, get to know their personalities. And after you have, that intelligence built in from what you've learned from these things, then you can adapt it at that point, especially if you like using a lot of group work or you like providing a lot of choice for your students and how they approach work. And you can sit these types of learning styles together, for example, and then maybe move them on different activities if you want them to use their strengths to assist the group that may have, strengths other places. But thank you, Edward. That was a really good question. Good luck this year.
Okay, we've got a question here from Charles. Is there a good way to maintain student attention during the lecture when using clustered seating? Rachel?
The best thing that you could do is simply walk around the room. Your students are going to get bored if you're parked in front. They are going to start engaging in distracting behaviors. If you walk around the room, you are going to maintain proximity to keep them on their toes. They're going to pay better attention. They are going to expect you to come around to them, and they're going to pay closer attention. And you're going to be able to have a better handle on all of that. You could also give each cluster of students a small whiteboard, and you could assign a note taker. You could assign somebody who tends to be off task to take the notes for their group. You could even change out that note taker every 2 minutes or so. But the key would be to keep your lectures short anyway. Students are only going to retain a certain amount of information at a time, and also to make sure that everybody's got a role in the note-taking so that they can stay on task. Active learning is what sticks the most, so don't rely too much on lecture. Thank you so much for that question.
All right, we've got one here from Neha. Kyle, can you give me some suggestions on how to get students to sit in their assigned seats on the first day of school? You got any experience with this?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Neha. So it's important that the students know which seat is theirs, right? And there are different ways that you can approach this. Something I always did was wrote their name on individual index cards, and then I taped it to the desk, and I usually left it there for like a week for their reference. You can also design and show your seating chart in the front of the room on your projector, especially on the first day. And when students begin to walk into your room, stand at the door and say, hey, so happy to see you on this first day. You can look at the desk and find your name, or you can look at the projector and find your seat, and then we'll do a attendance in just a few minutes. You'll also want to have a copy of that seating chart on yourself, printed out in your hand so you can easily reference it, and make sure the students are where they should be, or help them find their seats if they're having a lot of trouble. But thank you so much for that question.
Okay, Rachel, I got a question earlier from Dagny, and they want to know, new teacher here, what happens if I get into my room and don't have the supplies that decorate my walls?
Hey there, Dagny. I can see how that would be very concerning. You're new, you walk in, and there's this expectation that you should have things on your walls to help your students, and you find that you don't have them. There are a few different things you can do. First of all, ask your fellow teachers where they get their resources. They might have good ideas. They might even have things that you could borrow that they're not using at that particular time. Most schools have a supply closet. You want to go and see what's available to you and be resourceful with those materials, paper, markers, and so forth, do not be afraid to ask your administration. They expect you to have things on your walls to help with student instruction. They should be able to support you with that. The key is not to spend your own money if at all possible. The school ought to be receptive to the idea that you need supplies and help you in any way that they can. If your school has a parent-teacher organization, that would be a wonderful group to ask for supplies for your classroom and for your walls. If your community is fairly well resourced and receptive to helping, you could ask students to bring in materials, but be careful with that. You certainly don't want to attach a grade to it, and you don't want to make assumptions about your student population and what they can provide. Meanwhile, you can be inventive. Schools have paper, they have markers, and you have a whole group of students coming in who want to help you decorate the classroom, and that helps them invest in that whole community. So you and your students can create anchor charts, procedure charts, and all sorts of work that would be wonderful helps for your walls, and that's more creative too. Thank you so much for that question. Very good question.
All right, thank you, Rachel. I've got a couple more questions here in the emails, but I just wanted to remind everyone watching live, if you've got any questions about setting up your classroom, just let us know in the chat and we'll answer them live right here. So Kyle, I got an email from Bader who wants to know, I like the idea of sharing student work, but I'm afraid that some of them will be embarrassed by their grades. Any way to overcome this?
Hey, Bader. Yeah, thank you for this. So when sharing student work, my personal rule was always share everybody's creative work. If they're able to do something that is not like grade oriented and they're just drawing a picture or there's some sort of artistic component, that was the stuff that I liked displaying the most because everybody could get something out of that and they all like to look at each other's designs and it was a good talking piece. But if you do want to put up some examples on your wall, maybe of like really good work so that other students can see, like your expectations, for example, you can certainly do that, but make sure that you remove that student's name. You don't want to necessarily spotlight students in that way, even though you're demonstrating good work. All of a sudden, not only do they know who gave it, but they also know who didn't do it. So that could be a pitfall to fall into. So basic rule, if it's more creative, more artistic, ungraded, display it all that you want to. And if it's something that you're providing an example of, then remove the student's name. So thank you so much for that question.
Nice, good tips, Kyle. I've got one more question here. How long should you stick with a seating chart before trying something different? And that comes in from Callum.
Yeah, thank you, Callum. So what I would say is, one, as long as it's effective. For me, I had a couple classes where I kept the same seating chart the entire year. It just worked. But once you start seeing problems, you can start moving some students around. It might not necessarily mean that you have to completely redesign the seating chart. Maybe you just need to move one student or two students. But if it seems like you have a lot of different pockets and maybe students wanting to talk to each other, take some time, get to know those students and get to know, what other students may distract them and watch that for a bit. And then you can design your next seating chart with a lot more intention to where you keep these students who distract each other away from one another. So, try it as long as it's effective. When it stops being effective, analyze it, and then make sure you're creating the best seating chart that you can with that information that you gathered. So thank you so much for that question.
I would add on to what Kyle was saying here. Don't change just for the sake of changing. You might get antsy and say, oh, I feel like I need to try something new. Understand that a lot of your students will not do well with changes if they are not justified and purposeful. Understand that you've got to have a rationale behind what you do. If you've got a problematic group, like Kyle said, change it, but otherwise, don't deal with something that isn't broken. Make sure that you have reasons for the changes that you make.
All right, thanks Rachel, thanks Kyle. That's all the questions we have time for today. Launch Your Classroom Live will return on September 6th with a brand new episode, Building Rapport with Icebreakers. But that's not all. LYC will be releasing new content every Friday. So check back on August 23rd for our tips on materials management, and join us again on August 30th for another installment of our Ask an Educator interview series. And to get a head start on all these topics, please click the link in the description below to head over to Amazon.com and pick up your copies of the Launch Your Classroom book series in print and ebook form. And remember, To stay up to date on all the free professional development that EPI offers, subscribe to our YouTube channel. And while you're at it, click the bell icon to receive notifications when we go live. From all of us here at Launch Your Classroom, have a great weekend. Take care, and we'll see you next time.